My name is Ellen. I'm 64 years old, and just 2 weeks ago I buried my only child. His name was David, and he was 35 when his heart gave out. No warning, no symptoms, just gone. The day we held the service, I remember sitting in the front row, knees pressed together, hands clenched around the funeral program like it might hold me upright. The priest's voice droned on about peace and eternal rest, but all I could hear was the hum in my ears, that strange kind of silence that follows after something inside you breaks. Then she leaned in, Jessica, my daughter-in-law, and whispered so low it felt like smoke curling through my spine. "You have a week to get out." Just like that. No pause, no emotion. Her breath was still warm by my ear, and her hand rested lightly on my shoulder as if she were offering comfort. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I stared at the casket like I was staring through it. Like if I looked hard enough, maybe David would sit up and laugh and tell me this was all a mistake. But he didn't. His body lay still, dressed in the navy suit I'd picked out, the one he wore to his last job interview. I was still gripping that folded program, the corners digging into my palm. My fingernails had left marks in the paper, but I couldn't feel anything except heat rising from my chest to my throat. Jessica moved back to greet guests like nothing had happened. She wiped a single tear from her cheek, perfectly timed, as one of her friends pulled her into a hug. Someone behind me murmured something about how strong she was. I almost laughed. But nothing about me moved, not even the air in my lungs. After the service, people whispered their condolences. They squeezed my hands, touched my arm, and said the same lines they say at every funeral. But no one really looked at me. I was just the old woman in black, the mother of the man who'd died too soon. Jessica, in her sleek black dress and carefully styled hair, walked among them like a gracious widow on television. She made a speech in the reception hall, said David had loved deeply, laughed loudly, and would have wanted us to keep living. I stood in the back by the kitchen because I couldn't sit, not with my legs shaking the way they were, not with the way her words coated every memory of him like syrup, sweet but wrong. Later, we rode back to the house in his car. The scent of his cologne still hung on the seats. I thought that might break me, but I was too busy trying to understand what game Jessica was playing. This wasn't just grief. This was a calculation. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew this wasn't the first move she had planned. It was just the first one she couldn't hide anymore. She didn't speak the entire ride home. Her hand rested on the gear shift like she'd already taken full control of everything he left behind. When we got to the house, she offered her arm to her grandmother and helped her inside. Me? She didn't even glance back. I stood in the entryway while guests drifted into the living room. She handed out wine, laughed gently, and even joked with one of David's co-workers. She told the story about how they met during a work conference in Dallas, how he made her laugh by complaining about the coffee. Everyone smiled. I watched. I watched her remove the photo of our family from the hallway shelf and replace it with a framed quote. I watched her take down David's army shadow box and slide it into a storage bin. I watched her erase him, piece by piece, like he was just clutter she couldn't wait to toss. I stood there with grief thick in my throat and betrayal carving out a new space in my chest. Not just because I had lost my son, but because the woman he loved had waited until he was gone to reveal the truth. She didn't want to share this house. She wanted me out, erased, forgotten, and she wasn't wasting a single second to make it happen. That night, after the last guest left and the wine glasses sat half empty on the counter, I walked to my room. I paused at the door because something felt off. The air was still, too still, and when I reached for the lamp on the nightstand, the cord had been unplugged. My bed was made, not just tidied, but folded like in a hotel. My throw blanket was missing. I opened the top drawer of my dresser. Half of it was empty. I checked the next drawer. My jewelry box was gone. The closet door stood slightly open, and when I pulled it wider, I saw cardboard boxes stacked neatly in the corner. They were labelled in thick black marker. Mum's stuff. The kind of label people use when they're cleaning out someone else's attic. I stood there, not breathing, like maybe I'd walked into the wrong room. Like maybe someone had decided I didn't belong there anymore and started packing up my life before I even had the chance to grieve. It wasn't just the jewelry or the folded clothes. It was the message written in silence. I walked back into the hallway. The living room lights were still on. Jessica sat at the dining table with a glass of wine and her laptop open. She didn't look up when I entered. I cleared my throat and asked if she'd moved my things. She glanced up, smiled, and said she was just organizing. That would make it easier for the movers. Movers. The word echoed in my head. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't asked for any help. I asked about my jewelry. She told me some of it was in the safe. Said she didn't want anything to get lost with all the people in and out. I hadn't seen anyone go near my room. I reminded her that I never gave permission to touch my things. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said that David and she had talked about this, that they assumed I'd want to go back to my sister's place. I don't have a sister. She knows that. I told her this was my home. She looked right at me and said it was his home, that David would have wanted her to have space to grieve. Then she picked up her phone and started typing like I wasn't standing right there. I went back to my room, or what was left of it, and sat on the edge of the bed. I opened the drawer under the bed, the one where I kept my important papers, and found it empty. The file folder I always kept there. Bank records, medical forms, my passport, was gone. I searched the closet again, this time more slowly. I found a bin labelled Old Docs. Inside were crumpled receipts, warranty slips, random mail, and finally my folder. My name is on the label. Inside were the usual papers, except one was missing. The deed. The original house deed. The one with both my name and David's. The one we agreed to keep together when they bought the house. I helped with the down payment when David lost his job. It wasn't a loan, it was a contribution. That paper should have been in that folder. I stared at the empty space where it used to sit. My heart pounded, not from panic, but from clarity. Jessica was scrubbing me out, not just from the house, but from the past, from David, from everything. The next morning, the fridge was different. My labelled containers were gone. In their place were matching glass Tupperware, filled with food I hadn't made. My coffee mug had disappeared. The one David bought me years ago with my name on it. I opened the cabinets and saw new plates, clean and white, lined up perfectly. The old ones, the chipped ones with little stories, were nowhere to be found. It was like someone had pressed reset on the house. Like Jessica was designing a new life that never included me. Even the living room had changed. David's recliner was missing. The soft leather one he'd fall asleep in during Sunday football. In its place stood a stiff, modern chair that looked like it belonged in a waiting room. His blanket, the one his grandmother knitted, was folded and shoved behind the TV like clutter. I asked her where the recliner was. She said it didn't fit the room. Said she wasn't going to sit in a dead man's chair. That was the first time she said his name since the funeral, David. Like it was just a sound, not a loss. That was the moment I stopped feeling shocked. I wasn't confused anymore. I was certain. Jessica wasn't grieving. She was resetting. And she didn't want anything or anyone that reminded her of the life before. That included me. I waited until she left for her morning Pilates class. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Except for the ticking clock in the hallway and the soft hum of the fridge. I moved quickly but carefully, heading straight for the attic. David used to keep everything in labelled boxes. He was that kind of person, precise, organised, a little sentimental. I pulled the ladder down and climbed slowly, trying not to let the wood creak too loudly. The dust hit me first, then the scent of old papers and insulation. I scanned the stacks. Tax files, insurance forms, boxes marked Aaron's College, wedding planning, and finally one labelled home purchase. My hands trembled as I slid it across the plywood floor and opened the lid. Inside were folders stacked neatly, each labelled by year. I opened the folder marked 2016 and flipped through the pages. Loan approvals, inspection reports, insurance binders. And then there it was, a manila envelope with bold black ink that read, "Final Deed." I opened it slowly, like it might crumble from time. And there it was, my name, David, side by side. Signed, notarized, filed, clear as day. I stared at it for a long time, breathing in that one moment of certainty. They hadn't erased me. Not yet. I tucked the envelope inside my coat and climbed down quietly. When I stepped into the hallway, Jessica was already home, standing at the bottom of the stairs. She looked up, eyebrows raised. I smiled calmly. Just found some old paperwork, nothing urgent. She tilted her head, that tight smile she always used when she wasn't sure if she'd been caught. I walked past her without another word. In the kitchen, I scanned the deed and emailed a copy to myself and the lawyer David once recommended. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't confront her. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat at the dining table across from her, and asked if she had spoken to an attorney yet. Her eyes narrowed. No, she hadn't. I nodded, sipping slowly. Maybe it's time. She didn't say a word, but I saw it in her eyes. For the first time since the funeral, she realized I might not be as powerless as she thought. The next morning I woke up early, before the sun crept through the curtains. I made coffee quietly, the way David used to like it. Then I pulled out my laptop and opened a new email draft, addressed to Mr. Hale, the attorney David once trusted. I attached the scanned deed, labelled it clearly, and wrote a simple message. Need advice on property ownership. Attached is the original document, sent from my personal email, backed up to a drive, then saved again to the cloud under a folder named for legal use. I didn't tell Jessica. I didn't have to. She was too busy pretending this house already belonged to her. While she paced in the hallway, making calls, I sat calmly in the kitchen, cross-checking old financial files and logging into the bank account David and I once used for the down payment. At lunch, she offered me a salad I didn't ask for. Her tone was casual, almost sweet, like we were friends. I thanked her with a smile and left it untouched. Later that day, I labelled a manila folder and placed inside it the original deed, the scanned copy, and a printed receipt of my cashier's check from 7 years ago. I slipped it into the back of my drawer, behind folded sweaters she never looked at. Then I made 2 more copies. One went to the bank's safe deposit box, the other back into the envelope marked for Mr. Hale. Each move was quiet, deliberate. There were no confrontations, no shouting matches, but the walls around her illusion were starting to shift. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and didn't know what to make of it. I continued folding laundry, wiping counters, and keeping my voice calm, even as she moved my belongings and tried to erase my name. I let her think I was fading, while in truth I was rebuilding. That's the thing about quiet women. They watch, they wait, and sometimes they hit back without ever raising their voice. It happened on a quiet Wednesday morning. I walked into the kitchen expecting the usual forced small talk, maybe another passive-aggressive suggestion that I start packing. Instead, I found her standing by the sink with a tissue in hand and a soft, trembling smile. She turned slowly, like she'd rehearsed the moment, and said she had something to share. Her voice broke just enough to sound fragile. Then she placed a folded sonogram photo on the table between us and said she was pregnant. For a moment, I didn't speak. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I reached for the photo like it might explain something, like the answer was printed there in black and white. She watched me the whole time, like a performer waiting for applause. I looked down at the date on the image, the clinic label, the neatly typed information that claimed she was 8 weeks along. 8 weeks. My heart slowed. David had been gone for 10. I looked up, trying to keep my face calm. She said they'd talked about using a donor before, that David wanted her to have a piece of him. Her words were soft, a little shaky, but her eyes were steady. Too steady. Something didn't sit right. If David had planned something that big, he would have told me. He'd told me everything. Always had. Especially something like starting a family through donation. That wasn't a secret he would have kept. She said it was a private decision, that she didn't want to tell anyone until she was sure. I nodded slowly, feeling the burn rise behind my eyes. Not from sadness. From fury buried deep under control. She smiled again, touched her stomach gently, and said she hoped I understood. She needed stability now more than ever. That the baby deserved peace and safety and a fresh start. My lips moved, but nothing came out. In that moment, I saw the plan unfold. Sympathy, legitimacy, a courtroom story. The grieving widow, carrying the last hope of a lost husband, was threatened by an unstable mother-in-law, a woman just trying to move on, being held back by the past. But what she didn't know was that I had already checked the dates. And that photo didn't line up. Not with David's death. Not with biology. Not with the truth. So I smiled back and told her, gently, that changed everything. And in her eyes I saw relief. In mine I felt steel. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the sonogram photo under the lamp. I scanned every inch of it, from the clinic's logo to the digital timestamp in the bottom corner. The date read 4 weeks ago. 4. Not 8. And certainly not 10. David had already been dead for 6 weeks when that image was taken. I turned the photo over and found nothing on the back. No scribbles, no accidental notes. Just the cold, polished face of a calculated lie. I pulled up the folder of screenshots I'd taken of the documents in her tote bag. One of them had the same clinic name. Same week, different file. That one was labelled IVF intake, donor confirmed. I lined the 2 dates side by side and took a photo of them together. Then I opened my email and forwarded it all to Mr. Hale. No subject line, just 3 words in the body. We need to talk. He responded faster than I expected. His reply was short but sharp. This helps us. If she's fabricating pregnancy for sympathy, we can request medical proof and timeline verification. If it's false, it's fraud. I sat back and stared at the fridge. Her new food containers were still neatly stacked, with her handwriting on every label. She was trying to control every inch of the house, every narrative, every impression, but she made one mistake. She thought I wouldn't question her story. She underestimated my memory. David would never have hidden something that important, and she had counted on my silence, my grief, my age, my supposed weakness. But I wasn't fragile. I was watching, and now I had something real, tangible, verifiable. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was evidence, proof that she had built her lie on dates and paper trails, and I knew exactly how to follow them. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, from clarity. I could feel the weight shift in the house. The balance is tipping in my favor. And the next morning, when she offered me coffee and smiled like nothing had changed, I smiled back and thanked her. Because now I was sure. She thought she was playing a long game, but she forgot I had already started mine. By Friday morning, I had everything. The scanned deed with both our names, the original cashier's check from the down payment, the refinance records excluding Jessica, and the ultrasound photo with the mismatched date. I placed them all in a single folder, labelled it cleanly, and walked it straight into Mr. Hale's office. He opened it quietly, page by page, his eyes growing sharper with every document. He didn't smile, he didn't praise, he just nodded and said this was enough to act. Within an hour, the motion was filed. A petition to freeze property transfers, request deed validation, and investigate fraudulent claims related to eviction and inheritance. The paperwork was heavy, but the moment was light. For the first time since David's funeral, I felt like the ground beneath me was solid again, not because I was fighting, but because I had proof. A few days later, the court summoned us for a preliminary hearing. Jessica showed up in a cream blazer, holding her sonogram like a prop. Her lawyer opened with a speech about grief, motherhood, and the need for peace in a time of tragedy. Mr. Hale didn't argue. He presented the signatures first, one real, one forged. Then the deed. My name. And David's. Notarized, dated, untouched by Jessica. He pulled up the metadata from the file she had created, showing it was last modified on her laptop, weeks after David had passed. The judge leaned in, took her time, then asked only one question. Was my name ever removed from the title? Mr. Hale answered without hesitation. Never. Jessica shifted in her seat. I saw it in her shoulders, the way they dropped just slightly, like the story she'd rehearsed didn't hold the weight she thought it would. Her lawyer whispered something quickly. She didn't look at him. The judge declared the deed valid and co-ownership fully recognized. All eviction notices were null. Any future claims would be subject to deeper legal review. Jessica didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, blinking, like someone had pulled the floor out from under her, but left her seated. The room was quiet when the judge stood and adjourned. No drama, just finality. Outside the courthouse, Hale turned to me and said one word. Solid. I nodded, not in celebration, but in quiet affirmation. I didn't feel like I'd won a war. I felt like I'd cleared a fog that had tried to choke me since the day David died. She couldn't erase me. She couldn't rewrite what was true. And now the law knew it too. When we got back to the house, Jessica didn't say a word. She walked past me like I was air. But I didn't need her to see me. I only needed the system to see what was real. And now they had. I found it on the coffee table, plain silver, with no label. At first I thought it was trash. Then I saw how it was angled, centered perfectly between a candle and a coaster, like it was meant to be noticed. Jessica had already packed most of her things. I hadn't spoken to her in 2 days. But that flash drive, that was her parting gift. I plugged it into David's old laptop, the one she never touched because she said it smelled like dust and grief. One folder, one video, no password. I clicked play. She sat in the office chair, the one I had just used to print court documents. Her face was calm, maybe even smug. She said if I was watching this, it meant she was gone. Or I thought I'd won. Then she leaned closer to the camera. Her voice dropped. She said she did what she had to do. That I was never supposed to stay here forever. That I was just a guest who overstayed her welcome. She said David wanted me gone. That he never had the courage to tell me. That she helped him make the hard choices he couldn't. I paused the video right there. Not because it hurt. Because it was a weak bluff disguised as a confession. She didn't know I had the letter David wrote. The real one. His handwriting. His words, not hers. I hit play again. She said she tried to build something new with him, that I made it impossible, that she gave me chances and I refused to move forward. Then she smiled. That same smile she used when handing me eviction papers. She said I could keep the house, but I'd never forget what she said. I watched the video to the end. No apology, no truth. Just one last attempt to control the story. When it ended, I ejected the drive, walked to the trash can, and dropped it in without a second thought. Because I didn't need her version anymore. I had the facts. I had the deed. I had David's words. And most of all, I had peace. The kind she would never touch again. I wasn't looking for it. I was just putting away the last of David's things. The drawer in his old desk stuck a little, and when I tugged it free, something thin slipped behind the divider. It was a folded piece of notebook paper, worn at the creases. His handwriting was instantly familiar, slanted, neat, the loops tight, like he wrote it fast, but meant every word. At the top, he'd scribbled the date. 3 weeks before he died. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. No greeting, no structure, just words spilling onto the page. He said he was sorry, that he knew things had become tense, that Jessica had made him feel like he had to choose sides, and sometimes he didn't have the strength to push back. He said he felt trapped. She isolated him from the people he loved. He thought he could fix it, but every time he tried, she made him feel smaller. And then the final line. He told me not to let her take everything, that the house was always ours, that I should do what I had to do. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes, not because I needed to cry, but because for the first time I felt still. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't forced my way into a life that didn't want me. David never shut me out. He just didn't know how to fight. But he'd left me this, a piece of truth that no one could forge. I scanned the letter, saved a copy, and placed the original in my drawer next to the deed. That night, I made tea and stood at the window watching the porch light flicker. The house was quiet. Jessica was gone. Her noise, her schemes, her shadows had lifted, and as I looked around the kitchen, back to how it used to be, I whispered what I had waited months to say. My house, my rules,